They told me to stay away from her, but the alien queen chose to sit across from me. Captain Alex Stone stood in the crowded room, watching the alien dignitaries mingle with one another, their conversations a hum of strange languages. The air was thick with tension. The humans in the room, like Alex, were outsiders in this diplomatic gathering, a tiny but necessary part of a larger galaxy full of different species. The gala was supposed to be an opportunity for peace talks between various factions. But Alex knew better. Nothing in this galaxy was ever truly peaceful. He was a decorated officer in the Intergalactic Peace Force, and despite his rank, he felt like a small fish in a vast, dangerous ocean. The hum of conversation, the delicate clinking of glasses, and the soft, echoing laughter of alien species filled the grand hall. Alex adjusted his uniform, feeling the weight of his responsibilities. The peace talks were important, but his assignment tonight was even more critical. He had been tasked with monitoring the growing tensions between human factions and the Scifi, a race of alien rulers that had far more power than they let on. Alex's eyes swept the room, scanning the faces, assessing who was there and why. His mission was to keep an eye on the human leaders in the room. They were a potential threat to the fragile peace that held the galaxy together, but that wasn't the only thing bothering him. No, tonight there was something much bigger on his mind. At the far end of the hall, the doors swung open and all conversation abruptly ceased. A figure stepped into the room. Her presence was unmistakable, powerful, and commanding. The crowd parted, giving her space, though none dared look her in the eye. Queen Scifi. She was the ruler of the Scifi, a race that had been both admired and feared by many across the galaxy. The Scifi were known for their telepathic abilities, their extreme intelligence, and their ruthless tactics when it came to leadership. Scifi herself was no exception. Stories of her cold demeanor, her ability to control entire armies with a single thought, and her overwhelming power had been whispered among humans for years. Alex had been briefed about her before coming to this gathering, and every single word had made it clear: do not cross her, do not engage her, and certainly do not ever get too close. Scifi stood at the center of the room, surveying the crowd with eyes that seemed to pierce straight through anyone she looked at. Her skin was a shimmering shade of violet, her long, silver hair flowing effortlessly down her back. Her eyes glowed with an otherworldly intensity, a calmness that suggested she held the fate of the room in her hands. She was an enigma, a symbol of power and mystery. And yet there was something else beneath the surface of her gaze, something Alex couldn't quite place. It was a depth of understanding that made him uneasy. As Alex watched her, his mind raced. He had always been taught to remain calm and focused, no matter the situation. But the sheer presence of Scifi made it hard to concentrate. He could sense the unease in the other humans around him as well. They too, like him, understood the unspoken rules when it came to Scifi. Stay away. Respect her power. Do not make the mistake of challenging her. And yet, as he stood there, trying to maintain his professional composure, Alex felt something unexpected, an unsettling pull toward the queen. He couldn't explain it. His instincts told him to keep his distance, but there was a curiosity, a fascination he couldn't shake off. What was it about her that made so many people afraid? The night stretched on, and Alex found himself glancing over at her again and again. He was aware that it was inappropriate, but his curiosity was overpowering. He had heard the rumors, the warnings, the countless tales of Scifi's ruthless leadership, but in person she was something else entirely. She was an enigma wrapped in power and mystery. She made the others in the room look small, insignificant. It wasn't long before Scifi began to move. She made her way through the crowd, her every step deliberate, her posture exuding confidence. The crowd parted for her as she walked past, but no one dared approach her. No one, that is, except Alex. Without warning, Scifi stopped in front of him. The room seemed to hold its breath. Alex's heart raced, and he instinctively straightened, realizing just how tall she was in comparison to him. Her eyes met his, and for a split second, Alex felt a jolt of something: fear, excitement, or perhaps both. "Captain Alex Stone," she said, her voice smooth but commanding. "I've heard much about you." Alex's breath caught in his throat. The words were calm, but they carried an unmistakable weight. He had been warned never to engage with her directly, but there she was, speaking to him as if they were equals. His mind scrambled for a response. Should he be formal, distant? Or should he risk something entirely different? Alex began, but his words caught in his throat. He cleared his throat. "I'm honored, Your Majesty." Seraphis smiled, though it wasn't the smile of someone who was genuinely pleased. It was the kind of smile that suggested she knew something he didn't. It was a smile that held secrets. "Sit with me," she said, gesturing toward a nearby table. "We have much to discuss." Alex stood frozen, caught between protocol and curiosity. The room seemed to close in around him. He glanced at his superiors, who looked at him with wide eyes, but none of them dared make a move. They, too, seemed to be waiting for him to make the next move. For a moment, Alex hesitated. This was wrong. He knew it was wrong. He was supposed to stay away from her, not engage her. But something inside him, some instinct, some unexplainable force, urged him to take the step. He found his legs moving toward the table, and before he could stop himself, he was seated across from her. The Queen's gaze didn't leave him as he sat. There was no smile, no warmth, just an intensity that made Alex feel like he was being examined, scrutinized from every angle. He tried to maintain his composure, but he could feel the weight of her eyes like they were peering directly into his soul. "I've been watching you, Captain," she said, her voice low and deliberate. "You are not like the others, you're different, and that makes you interesting." Alex swallowed, trying to suppress the knot that had formed in his stomach. He wasn't sure what she meant by interesting, but it didn't sound like a compliment. The air around them grew thicker, charged with an invisible tension. The Queen didn't wait for him to respond. Instead, she spoke again, her words cutting through the silence. "You've been warned about me, haven't you?" Seraphis continued, leaning forward slightly. "They told you to stay away. They told you I was dangerous. But here you are, sitting across from me like you don't fear me at all." Alex's heart beat faster. He could feel his hands growing clammy, but he forced himself to remain still. He nodded, though he wasn't sure what kind of answer she was looking for. "Yes, I've heard the warnings," he replied carefully, his voice steady. "But I've also learned that things aren't always what they seem." Seraphis's lips curled slightly into a smirk. "Wise," she murmured. "Very wise." For the first time since meeting her, Alex allowed himself to truly look at her. She was not just a queen. She was a force to be reckoned with, someone whose power seemed limitless. And yet, as their eyes met, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her than met the eye. A vulnerability beneath the cold exterior, a truth she was waiting to reveal. Before he could speak again, Seraphis stood up, her movements graceful and fluid. "Our time will come, Captain," she said, her voice soft but heavy with meaning. "But for now, we remain allies, whether you like it or not." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Alex alone with his thoughts. The room slowly returned to its usual buzz, but for Alex, everything had changed. He was no longer just a soldier in the peace force. He was now a player in a game much larger than he could have imagined, and the stakes were higher than ever. The days that followed the gala were filled with confusion and uncertainty for Captain Alex Stone. He could not shake the memory of Queen Seraphis's presence. It was as if she had planted a seed deep within him that was now growing, taking root in his mind. Despite the warning from his superiors and the many soldiers who shared their stories of fear and respect toward her, Alex couldn't help but wonder what it all meant. Why had she approached him? Why had she chosen to sit across from him that night, an act that had never been done before? Seraphis was a ruler, and Alex was just one of many humans in the galaxy. So why was she interested in him? What could he offer that others did? The questions plagued him, but he knew better than to allow them to distract him. As a soldier, it was his duty to remain focused on the task at hand. But the more he thought about it, the more curious he became. Queen Seraphis was unlike any leader he had ever encountered. Her cold exterior and unmatched power were only the surface. There had to be more beneath that surface, something Alex had yet to discover. He had been assigned to a task, monitoring the tensions between human factions and the Seraphi. But his mind kept wandering back to that moment in the gala, to the words Seraphis had spoken to him. "You are not like the others, you're different." What did she mean by that? Was she testing him, or was there something more? The days turned into weeks, and Alex found himself growing more and more distracted by the Queen's presence. He still saw her at various political meetings, but their interactions were few and far between. It was clear that Seraphis was a woman of few words, always surrounded by her loyal guards and advisors. She did not engage with others unless absolutely necessary. However, one morning, Alex received a message that would change everything. The message was simple. It contained an invitation to meet Queen Seraphis privately. The note said nothing else, just a time and a place. Alex's heart skipped a beat. This was not a routine meeting. This was something different, something significant. When the time arrived, Alex made his way to the designated location, an ornate room deep within the Serekta palace. The air was thick with an unsettling quietness. The walls were lined with intricate carvings of ancient battles and glorious moments from Seraphis's reign. At the center of the room was a large, polished table, and at the table sat Seraphis herself, her posture impeccable, her eyes piercing as she watched him approach. Alex stood at the door for a moment, unsure of what to do, but Seraphis's gaze never wavered. Her eyes were as sharp as a predator's, and Alex couldn't help but feel a slight chill crawl up his spine. It was clear that Seraphis was not someone you could simply walk into a room and expect to understand. She was a force of nature, untouchable and enigmatic. "Captain Stone," she said, her voice calm yet commanding, "please take a seat." Her words were a command, but there was an underlying invitation. Alex stepped forward and took the seat across from her, trying to remain as composed as possible. The room felt like it was closing in around him. The tension was palpable. "I trust you've been well," Seraphis said, her voice smooth as velvet, yet with an edge that made Alex's skin tingle. "I've been thinking about our last encounter. You were different than I expected." Alex didn't know how to respond. He had been told to never engage too deeply with her to keep things professional, but he had to admit that he was curious. "I'm not sure what you mean, Your Majesty," he replied cautiously. Seraphis smiled, but it was not the warm kind of smile one might expect. It was cold, calculated, and laced with hidden meanings. "You're not afraid of me, not the way others are. That's intriguing. Most people fear power, but you seem to see something else." Alex couldn't deny it. He wasn't afraid of her, not in the way the others were. Her power was undeniable, but he wasn't intimidated by it. Instead, he felt something else: curiosity, respect, even admiration for her strength. But he wasn't going to admit that to her. "Not yet, anyway. I try to judge people by their actions, not their reputation," Alex said, his voice steady. "I've seen the way others look at you. They don't know you the way I do." Seraphis's eyes narrowed, studying him intently. "And how is that?" she asked, her tone sharp like a blade ready to strike. Alex hesitated for a moment, then spoke carefully. "I see someone who carries the weight of an empire, someone who has had to make difficult choices for the greater good. I can't say I understand it all, but I respect it." Seraphis leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. "You are insightful, Captain," she said quietly, "but I'm not here to discuss my empire. There are far more important matters at hand." The shift in tone was subtle, but Alex could feel the change in the room. There was a new tension, a quiet urgency in Seraphis's voice. Something was happening, something big, and Alex was certain it had something to do with him. "What do you mean?" Alex asked, his curiosity piqued. He couldn't help but lean forward slightly, his instincts telling him that this was no ordinary conversation. "I need someone I can trust," Seraphis said, her voice low. "Someone who isn't afraid to get their hands dirty, someone who can see beyond the politics and the lies. I have enemies, Captain, enemies who wish to see my reign fall, and those enemies are closer than you think." Alex felt his pulse quicken. This was not what he had expected. He had known there was political unrest, but the Queen was telling him that her enemies were actively working against her. And she wanted his help. "Why him? Why now?" "I'm not sure what I can offer, Your Majesty," Alex replied, his mind racing. "I'm just a soldier. I'm here to follow orders." Seraphis's gaze never wavered. "You are more than just a soldier, Captain. You have the ability to see things that others cannot. You have the instincts of a leader. I've been watching you. And I need someone who is willing to step outside the lines. Someone who is willing to do whatever it takes." Alex's mind spun with the implications. She was asking him to join her cause, to become more than just a peacekeeper. She was asking him to risk everything. "Why me?" Alex asked, still struggling to comprehend what was happening. Seraphis smiled, a hint of something unreadable flashing in her eyes. "Because you're the only one who hasn't turned away from me, the only one who hasn't been corrupted by fear. You see me for what I am, and that makes you valuable." Alex didn't know what to say. This was a turning point, a moment that could change everything for him. He had been warned to stay away from her, but now she was asking him to step into a world of danger and intrigue, one that he couldn't fully understand. "You're asking me to betray my own people," he said slowly, To fight for something I don't fully understand. Seraphiz's gaze softened just slightly. I'm asking you to choose what's right, to stand by me, and together we can change the course of history. I won't force you to do anything, but I will tell you this. The galaxy needs change, and it needs people who are willing to fight for it. You have the power to make that difference, Captain. The weight of her words hung in the air, and Alex could feel the walls of the room closing in on him. He had always been a soldier following orders, but now, for the first time, he was being asked to make a choice. To choose who he was, what he stood for, and what kind of man he wanted to be. The silence stretched between them, and Alex felt the weight of it pressing down on him. What would he do? Would he take the risk, or would he walk away? Finally he spoke, his voice steady but filled with resolve. I'll help you, he said. Seraphiz's smile returned, this time with more warmth. I knew you would. As Alex left the room, his mind was in turmoil. He had just made a decision that would change everything. And he had no idea what the future held, but one thing was certain. He would never be the same again. The days that followed his decision to help Queen Seraphiz felt like a blur to Captain Alex Stone. He had expected this assignment to be another routine diplomatic mission, but everything had changed in an instant. The conversations they had shared, the way she had looked at him, the quiet yet intense moments, they all weighed on his mind as he tried to understand the implications of his choice. Despite the strange and powerful connection between them, Alex had his doubts. He was a soldier, not a politician or a diplomat. He wasn't sure he could truly help her, let alone protect her in the way she seemed to expect. Yet deep down, he knew he had already crossed a line, and now there was no turning back. He spent the next few weeks working with Seraphiz in the shadows of the political turmoil. The public saw a queen in control, a leader who commanded respect and fear, but Alex began to see a different side to her. In private moments, Seraphiz was not the cold and calculating ruler everyone believed her to be. She was burdened by the weight of her responsibilities, the pressures of ruling an empire, and the betrayal that seemed to be waiting around every corner. As Alex spent more time with her, his admiration for her grew. He saw how deeply she cared for her people, how much she sacrificed for the greater good, even when it meant making choices that would haunt her. There was a quiet sadness behind her eyes, one that spoke of the loneliness that came with her position. Alex couldn't help but wonder how many others had truly seen her for who she was, not just the queen, but the person behind the crown. One evening, after a particularly grueling strategy meeting, Seraphiz invited Alex to her private quarters. The invitation was simple, but it carried weight. They had been working together for days, yet they had never spoken about personal matters. They had barely exchanged any words beyond those that were required for their political maneuvering. This, however, was different. The air between them was charged, and Alex knew this moment would mark another shift in their relationship. He arrived at her chambers to find her standing by the window, her back to him. She appeared deep in thought, staring out at the city below. The room was dimly lit, with only the soft glow of the city lights casting shadows on the walls. There was an eerie quietness in the air, as if the entire palace was holding its breath. "Captain," Seraphiz said, her voice calm but distant. "Come in." Alex stepped forward, unsure of what to say. He had spent so many hours analyzing the political landscape, studying the conspirators, and trying to anticipate the next move. But now, in this private moment, the game had changed. This was not about tactics or strategy. This was about understanding the woman behind the crown. He stood there waiting for her to speak, and when she did, her words surprised him. "You know, sometimes I wish I could be like the others," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "To live without the weight of responsibility on my shoulders. To make choices without considering the consequences." Alex felt a pang of sympathy for her, but he didn't know how to respond. He was used to being the one in charge, the one who made decisions without hesitation. But he had never known the kind of burden that Seraphiz carried every day. "You've had no choice," Alex said softly. "You've had to make those decisions for the good of your people." Seraphiz turned to face him then, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that took him by surprise. There was something raw in her gaze, something vulnerable that she rarely showed to anyone. "I never asked for this," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I never wanted to be a queen, but the moment I was crowned, everything changed. I had to become someone else, someone stronger, someone who could make the hard decisions. But inside, I'm still the same person I was before all of this. Alex's heart ached for her. He couldn't imagine what it must be like to carry the weight of an entire empire on your shoulders, to have your every move scrutinized, your every decision questioned. He had seen her as a powerful ruler, a force to be reckoned with. But now, standing before him, he saw the woman who had been forced into a life she never chose. "I don't know what it's like to be in your position," Alex said, his voice filled with empathy. "But I know what it's like to be alone, to feel like no one understands you." "I felt that before." Seraphis looked at him for a long moment as if weighing his words. Then, without a word, she crossed the room and sat down on the couch. She patted the seat next to her, a silent invitation. Alex hesitated for a moment before sitting down beside her. The silence between them was heavy, filled with unspoken thoughts and emotions. Neither of them knew what to say next. They were two people from different worlds, yet in that moment, they understood each other in a way that words could not explain. "I've been thinking about the enemy," Seraphis said after a while, breaking the silence. "The ones who want to see me fall, they're closer than I ever realized. I've made mistakes, and now they're exploiting every weakness I've ever had." Alex frowned. "What do you mean?" "Who are they?" Seraphis looked away, her eyes distant once again. "They've been working within my own court. They've been planting seeds of doubt, turning my own people against me. There are those who want power, those who believe they can do a better job than I can. But what they don't understand is that it's not about power. It's about protecting the people. And if I lose that, I lose everything." Alex's mind raced as he processed her words. It was worse than he had imagined. The conspiracy against Seraphis was not just political, it was personal. There were people within her own circle who sought to betray her, and the queen had no one to trust, not even those closest to her. "We need to stop them," Alex said firmly. "We need to expose them before they do any more damage." Seraphis nodded slowly. "I've been trying to uncover who's behind it all, but they're clever. They hide in the shadows, manipulating the people around me. But I can't do this alone." Alex looked at her, his gaze steady. "You're not alone. I'm with you. I'll help you take them down." Seraphis looked at him, her eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and something else, something deeper. For the first time since meeting her, Alex saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. It was a small thing, almost unnoticeable, but it was there. And in that moment, Alex realized that he wasn't just helping her because it was his duty. He was helping her because he believed in her. And maybe, just maybe, he had come to care for her in a way he hadn't expected. "I won't let you down," Alex said quietly. Seraphis smiled, her expression softening for a brief moment. "I know you won't." As the night wore on, the conversation turned back to their plans. They discussed the strategies they would employ, the people they would need to trust, and the risks they would have to take. But even as they talked, Alex couldn't help but feel that something had changed between them. The bond that had begun in the shadows of the gala was growing stronger, and the lines between duty and personal feelings were becoming harder to define. The more Alex worked with Seraphis, the more he realized that he was no longer just a soldier following orders. He had become a part of something bigger, something that could change the future of both their worlds. And in the quiet moments between strategy sessions and political maneuvering, he couldn't help but wonder where this path would lead them. As he left her chambers that night, Alex's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. He had made a choice, and now he had to see it through. But one thing was clear, this wasn't just about stopping a conspiracy. It was about something far greater. Something that went beyond politics and power. It was about loyalty, trust, and maybe even love. And Alex wasn't sure he was ready for it. But there was no turning back now. The calm that had followed their decision to unite against the conspirators was short-lived. Despite the trust they had built, the stakes of their situation were higher than either Alex or Seraphis had anticipated. As the days passed, Alex could feel the tension building. The court was a dangerous place, full of enemies hidden in plain sight. They had to tread carefully, and every move had to be calculated. Queen Seraphis was not a woman given to fear, but even she could not deny the growing unease that hung over her reign. She had always known that power was fragile, that it could be lost in an instant. But the whispers of betrayal within her inner circle had begun to take shape. There were more enemies than she had originally thought. Even some of her most trusted advisors were now suspected of conspiring against her. Alex, however, was resolute. He had pledged to help her, and he would do so with everything he had. He was no longer just a soldier assigned to a mission. He had become a protector, a silent partner to the queen. And now, as the days stretched on, he found himself diving deeper into the web of intrigue that surrounded them. One evening, as they sat together reviewing intelligence reports, Seraphis leaned back in her chair and looked at Alex with a weariness that was becoming all too familiar. "Things are getting worse, Captain," she said, her voice low, filled with frustration. "I can feel it. The conspirators are closing in and we are running out of time." Alex studied her, his eyes narrowing. "We knew it wouldn't be easy, but we're not without resources. We still have people we can trust." Seraphis sighed and rubbed her temples, a gesture that made her look more vulnerable than Alex had ever seen her. "But who can we really trust? Every day it feels like someone new is working against me. Even those closest to me seem to have their own agendas. If this continues, I'll lose everything." Alex felt a pang of sympathy. It wasn't just her empire she stood to lose, it was her very identity. Seraphis was the queen, the leader of her people. If her enemies succeeded, it wouldn't just be a political loss, it would be personal. She would be seen as weak, unable to protect her own throne. Alex understood the gravity of the situation better than anyone else in the room. If they didn't act soon, the queen's reign would collapse. "We need to strike first," Alex said firmly. "We can't wait for them to make the next move. We need to uncover their plan and stop it before it's too late." Seraphis looked at him, her expression unreadable. For a moment there was silence. Then she nodded slowly, as if weighing the gravity of his words. "I agree," she said quietly, "but we need to be smart. They've already proven that they are willing to go to any lengths to see me fall. If we make a mistake, it could cost us everything." Alex's mind raced as he processed her words. This wasn't just about stopping the conspiracy, it was about surviving it. They had to outthink their enemies, stay one step ahead, and the longer they waited, the more dangerous it became. "I'll take care of the investigation," Alex said, his voice steady. "I'll track down the sources of the conspiracy and find out who is behind it, but we'll need to move quickly." Seraphis's gaze softened, but there was still a hint of sadness in her eyes. "I trust you, Captain. I know you'll do everything you can to protect me, but be careful. The closer you get to the truth, the more dangerous it becomes." Alex nodded. He had heard the warnings and he understood the risks, but there was no turning back now. He couldn't allow Seraphis to fall, not after everything they had been through together. He had already committed to her cause, and now it was time to see it through. The investigation began immediately. Alex spent the next few days gathering information, sifting through intelligence reports, and speaking with those who still remained loyal to Seraphis. He was careful, always watching his back, knowing that one wrong move could lead to disaster. The walls of the palace felt like they were closing in around him as he dug deeper into the conspiracy, uncovering hidden connections and buried secrets. As the pieces of the puzzle slowly began to fall into place, Alex realized just how intricate the plot against Seraphis was. There were powerful figures involved, both inside and outside of the Serekte court. The conspirators were not just trying to weaken her rule. They were working to tear apart the entire galaxy, using her as a pawn in a much larger game. If they succeeded, it wouldn't just be Seraphis who lost, it would be everyone. One night, as Alex reviewed the final piece of evidence, he felt a cold chill run down his spine. It was a letter, a single piece of correspondence that had been overlooked in the chaos. The letter was from one of Seraphis's closest advisors, a man named Tarkin, who had always been seen as loyal to the queen. But the letter revealed something entirely different. It was a message from the conspirators, confirming his involvement in the plot against Seraphis. Alex's heart sank. Tarkin was one of the last people he would have suspected, but there it was, clear as day. The conspiracy ran deeper than he had imagined. He wasted no time. He stormed into Seraphis's private chambers, the letter clenched tightly in his hand. When he entered, she was sitting by the window, staring out into the night. "Your Majesty," Alex said urgently, holding out the letter. "I've found the evidence. Tarkin is one of them." Seraphis turned to him, her expression unreadable. She took the letter from his hand and read it carefully, her eyes narrowing as she processed the words. "I knew it," she whispered. "I knew he was too good to be true." There was a long silence as Seraphis stood up and walked over to her desk, placing the letter down in front of her. Alex watched her closely, sensing that she was struggling to keep her composure. "Tarkin was one of my most trusted advisors," Seraphis said quietly, her voice filled with disbelief. How could I have been so blind? Alex stepped forward, his voice firm. You couldn't have known. These people are good at hiding their true intentions. But now we know who we're up against, and we can stop them. Seraphis looked at him, her gaze softening. You're right, she said, her voice filled with a quiet resolve. We will stop them, and we will make sure they never get another chance to betray me or anyone else. With the evidence in hand, the two of them began to formulate a plan. The conspiracy was far from over, but they were no longer fighting in the dark. They had a target, and now it was time to bring the fight to their enemies. The battle for Seraphis's survival had begun. The stakes were higher than ever, and the future of the galaxy hung in the balance. Alex knew there was no turning back. He was in this fight for good, and he would do whatever it took to protect Seraphis and the galaxy from those who sought to destroy everything they had worked for. The final days before their planned move against the conspirators felt like a storm was gathering. Every step they took seemed to draw them closer to an inevitable battle, one that would test everything Alex had come to believe. The discovery of Tarkin's betrayal had changed everything. What had seemed like a distant threat was now at their doorstep. There was no time left for second thoughts, no time for hesitation. They had to act, and they had to act fast. Seraphis had been eerily calm since they learned the truth about Tarkin. She spent her days carefully calculating every move while Alex did the same. They spoke little, but both understood the gravity of their situation. Each had their own methods for dealing with the tension. Seraphis, by retreating into her cold, calculated leadership, and Alex, by throwing himself into the investigation with relentless focus. The last piece of the puzzle had fallen into place. The conspirators had been waiting for this moment. They thought they could take advantage of Seraphis's strength, her trust in those closest to her. But they underestimated her. They underestimated Alex. One evening, as the two of them sat in Seraphis's private quarters, the plan was finally set. The time to strike had arrived. The conspiracy would be exposed, and Seraphis's enemies would no longer have the upper hand. Are you ready for this? Alex asked quietly, his voice steady but filled with a hint of uncertainty. Seraphis looked at him, her eyes betraying no emotion. She had learned long ago to bury her feelings beneath her role as queen. But Alex saw the flicker of something in her gaze, a quiet determination that made him believe they could do this. I was born ready, she replied, her voice firm. This empire needs change, and I will see it through, no matter what happens. The weight of her words hung in the air, a silent promise that whatever came next, they would face it together. That night, they set their plan into motion. Alex had been gathering intelligence, tracking down those who had been in league with Tarkin. It had been a delicate operation, involving allies who were not always trustworthy and enemies who had proven to be ruthless. But now, with everything on the line, there was no turning back. The first step was simple, a covert meeting with their most loyal supporters, those who had not been corrupted by greed or fear. Alex knew they had only one shot at this. If they failed, it would mean the end for both him and Seraphis. The risks were higher than ever, but he believed in their cause. He had come to trust Seraphis more than he ever thought possible. As the night approached, the tension in the air grew thick. Alex met with his small group of allies, trusted soldiers and loyal advisors who had kept their silence in the face of the growing conspiracy. The time had come for them to strike. The palace would be theirs. They moved quickly and quietly, slipping through the shadows of the palace's inner halls. Their goal was simple: expose the conspiracy and take control of the palace before the traitors had a chance to react. Alex could feel his heart racing in his chest. He had fought in many battles, but this was different. This wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a fight for the future of the galaxy. And it was one that would define who Seraphis was and who she could become. Seraphis joined them as they reached the inner chambers of the palace. She was ready, her eyes burning with the same intensity that had kept her alive through years of political warfare. Together, they made their way to the central control room, the heart of the palace's power. It was here that the conspirators had made their move, planning to seize the throne and plunge the galaxy into chaos. When they arrived, Alex was struck by the sight before him. The room was a stark contrast to the cold, calculated environment he had expected. There were no grand speeches, no dramatic final showdown. Instead, there was only silence, a heavy, expectant silence that seemed to stretch on forever. Seraphis stepped forward, her gaze scanning the room. She was ready for this. Alex could see it in the way she held herself, in the way she moved. She was no longer the queen who had once trusted everyone around her. She was a queen who had learned to trust only herself and Alex. "I know what you've been planning," Seraphis said, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "But you underestimated me. You underestimated what I'm capable of." The conspirators were caught off guard, their plans crumbling in the face of Seraphis's calm resolve. They had never expected her to fight back this fiercely. But it was too late for them. The truth had been exposed, and there was no escape. Alex stood by Seraphis's side, his heart racing as he watched the enemies who had betrayed her fall one by one. It wasn't a battle of strength, it was a battle of will, and Seraphis's will was unbreakable. As the final traitor was exposed, Alex couldn't help but feel a strange sense of relief. They had done it. The conspiracy was over. Seraphis had won. The future of the Empire was secure. But even in this moment of victory, there was still a part of him that felt uneasy. They had won, but at what cost? Seraphis turned to him as the last of the conspirators were taken away. Her eyes were filled with a mixture of exhaustion and satisfaction. But there was something else there, too, something deeper. A question that Alex knew had been lingering in both of their minds since the beginning of this journey. "What now?" Seraphis asked quietly. Her voice was soft, almost uncertain. Alex hesitated for a moment before responding. He had seen her as a queen, a leader, someone who held the fate of an entire galaxy in her hands. But now, in this moment, he saw her as a person who had fought for everything she had and who had come out on top. She was stronger than anyone he had ever known, and she wasn't done yet. "We move forward," Alex said firmly. "We rebuild, we make the galaxy a place where everyone can live in peace, and we do it together." Seraphis smiled, the weight of the past few days lifting from her shoulders. She had fought for this moment. And now, for the first time, she could see a future that wasn't just about survival, it was about creating something new. A new empire, a new world. "Together," she repeated, her voice filled with determination, "we'll make this empire something worth fighting for." As the two of them stood there, side by side, Alex realized that this was just the beginning. The battle for Seraphis's future had been won, but there would always be new challenges, new threats, and new obstacles. But as long as they had each other, they would face them together. And for the first time in a long time, Alex felt something he hadn't felt in years, a sense of hope.